Hello, I want to welcome everyone to the Power of Our Story. And today we have Steve.nisbet. He is a former U.S. Special Warfare Airman, otherwise known as a Pararescueman. And he is also the president and co-founder of Shields and Stripes. So today we're just going to hear Steve's story and just kind of what happened in his career, what brought him to now being the president and co-founder of Shields and Stripes. So Steve, welcome.
Hey, Sarah, thank you. Appreciate your introduction. That was excellent, spot on. Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So tell us about your story. What did you do just growing up? Why did you want to be in the military, and what happened in your career?
Yeah, I'll start from the beginning. Absolutely. So growing up, like I was just telling you, I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and my dad has spent 30 years in law enforcement. But before that, he was in the Air Force as a security forces airman, but way back in the day. And so as I watched him grow up, or as I grew up and watched him as I grew up, I'd always wanted to be in some sort of action like role. I never really was like, I want to be a police officer, but I did want to follow the excitement and the way that he a similar career path, if you will, because he was I could tell he was always doing something exciting. And however, throughout school, as I went through schooling and I was going to go to college and whatnot, I actually took on astronomy because I'm a space nerd also. So I went to college, went to a community college in Tucson for astronomy. And so that's two different sides of me. One wanted the action, and one wanted to learn and do science and stuff like that. So as I went into the science route, along with several of my other high school friends that went to the U of A for engineering and whatnot, I started going to this class and realized it was just like high school, and I was surrounded by people that were not of a similar demographic as me. They're significantly older, and it just like I was not this wasn't it for me. So it wasn't scratching my itch, and I wasn't fulfilled in what I was trying to do. So started looking at different options as I was working different jobs. I worked at like a small arcade out in Tucson, and I worked at Target for a while. And I was like, I still got to figure out what I want to do with my life. So eventually, I just went into a recruiting office, and I went to an Air Force recruiting office because that's what my dad went into. He was in the Air Force. My grandfather was in the Air Force. So following those same footsteps. And so as I took an ASVAB and I continued through that process of recruitment, I was going to be selected or I chose the career path of actually a nuclear weapons apprentice. And because I had scored really high on my ASVAB, and I was like, what's a job that people normally can't get unless they score really high? And they're like, this is it. And so my friends in high school were engineers or going to school for engineering, and they were going to get jobs at Raytheon and IBM. And I was like, well, I'll meet them in the middle also, because I'm going to go do this, except I just never got a scholarship or anything to go to these universities and whatnot. So I'm going to do it through the military, go do 4 years in the military, and then I'm going to go schooling that way. And as I stepped out of that recruiting office with a job of nuclear weapons apprentice, there was an Army recruiter next door, and he stopped me and he said, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" And I was like, "I'm good, man. I have a job. I'm already set." And he's like, "You want to be in special forces?" And I was like, "Well, that sounds pretty cool. Yeah, what do you got to say? I'm going to listen to this." And he's like, "I will give you $25,000. You get in, you go today." And I was like, "I'm not ready to go today." But I listened to his spiel, and I was like, no one's ever asked me that. No one's ever said, "Hey, do you want to be special in some way?" And I never thought of myself in that capacity. And I was like, man, I like all of that, except I also don't want to be in the Army. That's the only thing. I don't want to be in the Army. And so I got up and I was like, I might come back. And so I got up and went right over to the Air Force recruiting office and sat down. I was like, "Hey, do you guys have a special operations career field?" And they said, you already have nuclear weapons, just go with that. And I was like, yeah, but I want to know if you have special operations career fields in the Air Force. And he's like, yeah, we got PJs and controllers, but you're not going to make it. Don't worry about it. Just keep going with what you have. And I was like, can you just give me some information on it? So I went back, I looked it up, and I was like, I want to do that. And I actually wanted to be a combat controller, which if my combat controller buddies watch this, they'll get a kick out of it. And so I started training for 6 months to do the pass test, which is the physical ability and stamina test. And it was a mile run, or a mile and a half run. You had to do a 500-meter swim, and then a bunch of calisthenics, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups for certain numbers. And so I'd been training a certain way, and then I went to take the test, and they're like, all right, take the test, did it. And they're like, all right, you're going to be a PJ. And I was like, hold on a second. I thought I was going to be a combat controller. And the recruiter was like, well, it's the same thing. When you get to basic training, you'll figure it out there. You get to choose whatever you want to do. And I believed him. And I was like, okay, cool. That makes sense. So I started looking it up, and I was like, these aren't really the same thing, but he said I can change it when I get there, and I'll figure it out when I get there. Signed my life away, went to basic training in October of 2005, and then started that whole process. And there was, just in my basic training class or group that we were in, there was about 30 other individuals that were going to be going to training for PJ and combat control. And back then, I think it was like 6 weeks or 5 weeks of basic training or something like that. And I would go to sleep every night, and they're continuing to do their calisthenics and pull-ups and stuff. And the basic training instructor pulled me aside, and he said, look, man, you're not going to make it. All these other people are going to be the ones that are going to be able to get through the in-doc course, and you're going to be the first to quit because you're going to sleep at night, and they're putting in the extra work. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm tired. Like, I think I'm trying to get to sleep. You're making us wake up at 3 a.m. And it's 8, 9 p.m. Like, I need that rest. And so I was like, I don't know, maybe this guy's right, but we'll see when we get to indoc. So finish basic training, get to what used to be called indoctrination course, and it was 12 weeks of selection, where each week you had an evaluation on Monday, and then Tuesday through Friday was training, which was all just physical training of running, going in the pool, drowning you in the pool, swimming in the pool, rucking, just getting your butt kicked from 4 a.m. till 4 p.m. of just constantly getting put through the ringer physically. And so as we continued on, we started with 120 of the candidates going through indoc. And by the end of that 12-week course, we finished with 12. So it was a 90% attrition rate. And of those 30 other people that were in my basic training class, I was the only one left. And so I would have loved to go back to Sergeant Walker, I'll never forget, and say, hey man, remember when you said that I wouldn't make it and that these other ones would? Like, I'm the only one that did. So finished with 12 in that course, and then went on for the next 2 years of training to actually get my beret and do the job. So as I went through that whole period, finished my PJ training just to get the beret and do the job. So I joined in 2005 and finished that in 2008. So it took about 2.5 years to finish all of that training. And that's airborne, survival, underwater survival, free fall school, dive school, paramedic, EMT basic, and then your actual apprentice course school. So there's a lot of training. And then when I finished the training, I got orders to go out to Okinawa, Japan. So I went to Okinawa for 3 years, and I went to a special tactics squadron, which when I joined and I was like, I'm going to be a PJ, or I accepted that I was going to be a PJ, I then was like, I want to do more of the rescue side. And so you have two sides. There's a special tactics side and a rescue side. The special tactics side is typically known for deploying their guys as singletons out to work with ODAs or special forces teams and SEAL teams, Ranger teams. And then you have a rescue team that typically deploys together as a unit in a group. And they also do a lot of civilian type rescues. And that got me, like, I was just more excited about the civilian type rescue and less excited about the combat stuff. And then I got to the S2 squadron, did my first deployment in 2010 out to Jalalabad, and I was doing a CSAR deployment, which is typically usually not very exciting. Um, and that's where I kind of learned that I had a black cloud of doom around me, is because a lot of pretty gnarly things started happening in that deployment. 2010 was a pretty deadly year for U.S. forces. 2010 to 2012 were probably the most deadly years, especially in special operations. And so we responded to several helicopter crashes, and um, our base was constantly getting attacked, some hostage rescue incidences and stuff like that. So it was a very busy deployment, which typically it's not. And so that kind of now gave me the combat itch of like, I really like that. Like there was an excitement. And meanwhile, I was 2010, I was 23 years old at the time, 23 or 24. Um, and so got that itch and I was like, I want to do that more of that. So as I was leaving my duty station in Okinawa, the mainland earthquake in Japan happened. I don't know if you remember in 2011, the Fukushima reactor melting down and a tsunami hitting that. So I had the opportunity to go out and do some rescue and recovery operations out there for a couple weeks, or a little over a month, and go out and just see the devastation out there. It was pretty wild experience just to see the amount of devastation that just this water can have. And it looked like a movie. It was, I mean, you fly around in a helicopter. We flew about 25 miles out to sea, and there was a line of debris about as long as the entire east coast of Japan, with houses, full houses, vehicles, trucks, containers, all floating out there. And it was just a straight line. So we flew low and just to see if we could see anybody out there. We actually rescued somebody out there, floating on top of his house. So that was a pretty wild experience that he was actually able to survive that long, floating out there. It was freezing cold. It was snowing. There was at least another 700 earthquakes that took place after that. So it was pretty devastating to see all that destruction. Left there and went to Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, Nevada. Went to now a rescue squadron, and then went and immediately was thrown into doing some civilian rescues out in Zion National Park in Utah. So did some rescues out there, and then did a couple back-to-back deployments in Afghanistan, where again it was very busy, and very hot. So got into a few firefights, a lot of crashes, a lot of IEDs picking up people, either mass casualties, things like that. So got my fill of getting shot at and shooting other people and picking up Americans and coalition forces, either dead or dying. So doing that every day for a period of 4 months at a time and doing it back to back. I try to explain to some folks about how how that community gets affected. If you can imagine, we were like a fire station waiting on call. And so we would get a call and we had to be up in the air in about 8 minutes. And so 8 minutes was our timeline to get information, come up with a plan, get onto a helicopter and start flying towards whatever it was. Now, these are moments where you could be sitting here we were watching Game of Thrones quite a bit and some other TV shows and working out. And then all of a sudden you get a scramble call and now your adrenaline level spikes, go into a firefight, come back, restock all your gear, and now you're plummet. And then you get another call and then it spikes and then goes down and keep doing that over and over again. Where typically forces all over Afghanistan, wherever region we're at, they're maybe getting in a couple firefights a deployment, but we're covering an entire theater, an entire area. So we were getting into firefights every single day and doing it over and over and over again. And there was no days off. Like we didn't have like, hey, Saturday's our day off where we just get to hang out. It was every single day. You have a 14-hour shift and you never know what's going to happen on that shift for 4 months. So did that several times and I really enjoyed it. But as the rescue community started pulling out of Afghanistan, at least the deployments were dying down and we weren't getting as busy anymore. I still had fight in me, and this was 2013 or so. And so I was 26 years old. I wanted to go back into the special operations or specifically the special operations community, and I s- assessed for a unit, one of our tier one units called the 24th Special Tactics Squadron. Put in a package, and so this squadron's equivalent to, and we work directly with SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force. So being able to go through that selection is a whole nother selection process, a whole nother package you have to submit, and just another kick in the gut of making sure you have what it takes to be there. So showed up there, actually left from Afghanistan pretty much straight to North Carolina to do the assessment. And it's a 10 day, 2 week assessment, and a 48 hours of just getting crushed in every way you could possibly get. And so 15 of us, all combat veterans, very decorated individuals, going through the selection. Only 6 of us were picked up on this particular assessment. So went through what we call Green Team, or used to be called Green Team, and it's another year of training. So now you're doing all the same stuff you did, only at a higher level with better gear and more stress, where you can't get anything wrong. Everything has to be right. It has to be done right the first time, and you'd never make the same mistake twice. Otherwise, you're pretty much fired and you're out of here. So went through that training, got put on some teams, and then started cycling through deployments. And so went to several different AOs across the world, fighting just about every terrorist organization on the planet. And I would say that time period was that I was there was 7 years of active deployments and fighting. So that was 10 deployments that I was able to jump onto. And I would say in 2019, May of 2019 is when I started to notice some memory loss, some significant memory loss. And meanwhile, I'm probably 20, 30, 31 years old at the time, something like that, 33. And I'm now like just having some significant emotional outbursts. I'm kind of disconnected from everybody, have memory loss, and I start getting cognitive testing done at our unit. At the unit, we have a human performance staff that works directly for us to keep us operating at a high level. So nutritionists, physical therapists, strength conditioning coaches, psychologists, neuropsychologists, everybody working together to keep us operating at a high level. And so I use them pretty heavily. And I, especially in 2019, when I said I have memory loss issues, did an MRI, took some cognitive testing, and they're like, your brain is actually functioning well above normal especially than the average person. One area of note is attentiveness, and that's actually pretty indicative of severe PTSD. And I was, I didn't, I don't know, I didn't want to hear it really. I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't have that. Um, I don't act like those people in the movies. I don't start freaking out, waking up in the middle of the night, choking my wife or anything. Like, I'm not trying to fight anybody. Like, I'm normal for what I think normal is. And so I was encouraged to enter into some therapy with our psychologist there. And so I did, and I was resistant at first. And as I continued into the therapy, I started to identify symptoms I didn't really realize that I had. Distance from the family, irritability. I didn't enjoy doing my job anymore. I was just showing up just to show up, and had to perform because I was expected to perform, and I did it well. I had sleep disorders. I had sleep apnea, and yeah, I had significant memory loss. So a lot of these things were just compiling. And then one day, my wife had kind of sat me down and said, "Hey, your 2 boys who are 9 and 7 at the time are scared of you." And so that was a kick in the gut of like, okay, like maybe there is something wrong, and I'll take this therapy a little bit more seriously. So as we went into that therapy for a few months, I started to enjoy my job again, get some tools to help me through some of the instances of anxiety that I didn't realize I had, and start continuing through that journey of recovery, I guess, or working on self healing. I was a team leader of a group of guys, and so there was PJs and combat controllers on this team. We set up a climbing trip in Boise, Idaho, in October 2019, And this was to really build morale. We're about to enter into an alert cycle with the Army, and we're coming back from deployments. We're going to relearn each other and really get some team bonding going on. So part of the trip was to do some mountain rescue and some rock climbing, and then just empower these younger PJs to be leaders. And so climbing went excellent first day. Second day was also excellent. We're finishing up one of our climbs of the day. I'm wanting to call it a day, turn around the corner as we clean up gear, and one of our guys is already climbing halfway up a route. And I was like, dang it, I was done. I'm ready to go have some food and beers. So I went up to one of our guys and said, "Hey, what's the plan?" He's like, "Hey, he's gonna get up there and belay everybody up. We're all gonna climb up, and then we're gonna rappel down." And I was like, "All right, that's not a very big face. It's to take like 30 to 45 minutes." So as our guys start getting up there, one of our guys starts setting up kind of a rappel line adjacent to the climbing line. And I was like, "Well, that's gonna go a little bit faster, so I'll just climb up and hop over to that line and wrap down, and it'll be good." As I started climbing, I was the last one to start climbing. One of our guys started to rappel down that line. He got down, started cleaning up everything safely, and we were right on track. I got to the top and started instructing one of my younger guys of how I like to build anchors, how I like to use traditional climbing pieces of protection for anchor building. And our second guy was starting his rappel. And he got about halfway down, and you can hear a loud crash or an explosion or a bang. And I looked over and I just saw a rope moving across the ground. And I didn't really compute with me what was happening. And really, then it dawned on me that the anchor where the pro was in, the rock around it exploded and failed. And so that cracked and shattered. And the guy that was on the rope rappelling fell. So he fell about 30 feet, hitting the rocks below. This is a 70-foot face. One of our other guys was doing what he trained to do, the guy that tied the anchor, and he was tied into the anchor. So he clipped his harness into that anchor. And so the weight of the guy that was falling the 30 feet pulled the other one off. So he fell the full 70 feet and got yanked off and whipped off. And so he slid by me as I was watching the rope go, and I watched him go. And as he's trying to resist it and kind of saying, "Whoa, whoa, 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 stop," and just went. And he flipped over. I watched him flipped over and then land onto his back, bounce over to his face, and could hear him kind of moaning. And I thought, man, like, he's definitely paralyzed. He's definitely got a broken back of some sort. I've got to go. Like, I'm going through the process of treatments in my head as a medic. These other younger guys that were with me may not have seen as much trauma or treated people like I have. And so giving them instruction of, "Hey, this is what I need you to do, call 911." Asked one of the other guys that was up there with me, "Is he okay to rappel down? When you get down there, I need you to bring me this med bag so we can put an airway in." Set up my rappel, ran over, looked, listened, and felt for a pulse, and I didn't have anything. Rolled him over, still had nothing, and we started compressions. So we started CPR on him, and Josh, or the other PJ that was with me, brought over the airway kit. One of our other guys is on the line with 911. I'm trying to explain to them as a medic what's happening. I tried to intubate our guy Peter twice, and I just couldn't guarantee that the tube went in between his cords and into his trachea. And so I needed to make sure that it was in there, and I didn't want to manipulate his neck too much because I felt it was broken, and he had some significant head trauma, at least on his face. He had a compound fracture on his arm, and so I was just trying to be very careful with what I was doing as far as his neck goes. So the only thing that I could really do to guarantee that this tube was going to be in where it needed to be in his airway was to do a crike or a surgical airway. So cut a hole in his neck and put a tube in there. And so as I'm doing that, I'm explaining to dispatch exactly what's happening, what's going on, and I'm asking them to launch life flight. And they didn't have authority to launch life flight because I'm not one of their first responders. So they wanted a paramedic from their unit to be there to launch life flight. And I'm yelling at the dispatcher that, "Hey, I'm a paramedic. He is in cardiac arrest. We are doing CPR. I've just put an airway in. I need life flight to launch right now. And meanwhile, we're on the side of a mountain. So I asked, hey, does it have a hoist? And she couldn't give me that information. We put him on a litter, a Skedco litter, which is a hoistable litter, covered him up, and continued doing CPR. Josh, one of our other guys, he put a finger thoracotomy in, or essentially a field chest tube just without the tube. So we cut a hole in his chest and then rolled him over and drained it out. And about a liter of blood came out of that, his chest cavity. Sealed it back up and then started continuous with compressions. And we couldn't drain too much blood because I didn't have the blood to replace um, him with. So finally, the police officers find us. I had one of my guys going up and down the mountain to try to get their attention as they're driving back and forth on the highway. Fire department pulls up and one of the guys launches. Even he sprints up to the top, and I was able to ask him, "Hey, do you guys have a hoist on the life flight?" And he said, "No, it's not hoist capable." And right then is kind of when it dawned on me that I'm not getting him back. Like the break in CPR and the movement that we're going to have to take of moving him down this slope, and it's about 400 meters from where we are to the street, and then it's an elevation difference of probably 500 feet, and it's not the smoothest terrain. So we'd have to set up like a small low angle rope system to safely carry him down, and that break is going to be about 20 to 30 minutes of CPR. So like the chances of us getting him back is going to be very, very slim. So the rest of the fire department and the medics get there, suction out his airway. We throw pads on him. And as they're throwing pads, I know what's going to come up. And our guys, the other guys that I'm with, are working really, really hard, as hard as they can to try to bring him back. And because they don't have the experience that I had with working on patients, they didn't lose hope as early as I did. And so I asked them to go step aside, start cleaning up some of our gear, and wait while the other medics start doing work. And so the other medics took over CPR. They threw the pads on, and then it came up as a systole, so a flat line. And I asked that they turn off and on again, and then replace the cables, try it again. And they did that, and then it came back as a systole. And so as I'm bagging him between my legs, and that's the time period I gave to myself of that what's going to happen next. Like that 2 minutes is really all the time I gave to myself, because I knew what was going to come next was going to be me going through a whirlwind of reports, investigations, taking care of my team, explaining exactly what happened. All of these things are going to come my way. So I visualized the notification, the memorial, the funeral, me coming home, my team coming home, what's going to happen next, like all of those things that went through my mind. And so I just sat there and for about 2 minutes acknowledging what just happened and what just took place. So as soon as I was able to step away, they put a blanket over him, and then was able to carry him down to the street where we were waiting. And then we were able to put him in a body bag. And one of the police officers asked if we would like to put a flag over his body. And so typically that's what I've done downrange many, many times. And I said, absolutely, this is, we got to give him the honor and the respect that he deserves. So we placed a flag on his body bag and saluted him as we put him into the mortuary affairs van. And right after I put him in there, I called up my boss and said, hey man, this is the last flag I'm going to put on a teammate. I think I'm done doing this. And so at that moment, I just didn't want to be doing my job anymore. I did not want to be PJ. I did not want to be in the military. I wanted to disappear and go somewhere else. And so he said that, let's talk about it when you guys get back here. Just get your guys back here safely. And so then the investigation started. So we got back to North Carolina, did the whole memorial, the funeral, and then I pulled myself off of team to start falling back on those human performance resources I described earlier and go back into therapy. And so utilizing the therapy, I had back into depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, no will to do anything. I see myself as a failure as a PJ, as a leader, no confidence in myself in doing my job. I didn't want to do anything. And I didn't want anybody's forgiveness. I didn't want to hear anybody's telling me it wasn't my fault. I didn't want to, like, I wanted everybody to hate me. And I think that was the hardest part, was that everybody did not hate me and nobody blamed me. And I wanted them to. So after doing that for 2 months, that was October of 2019. In December of 2019, I came back as a team leader. And within 24 hours of coming back, we blew out on a no notice deployment. So I got a call at 8 in the morning, and then we were on our way to a deployment site, and by noon. So we're flying out, and I, I'm telling myself, okay, like, you're ready for this. This is an opportunity to prove yourself and have the confidence that you used to have. And I did. And we were out there for 2.5, 3 months, and was very successful. Nobody got injured. And we did what we needed to do and come back. And so I was excited that I was able to lead the team and do some very exciting things downrange, and had the confidence I needed to deploy again. We're planning to deploy again in May. So this is February, May, or March, April timeframe that we're training up to go to our deployment in May. And in April, the investigations closed out to the accident. And what they found was that there was nothing we could have done to prevent what happened or to change the outcome of what happened, but the military needed to hold somebody accountable. Because I was the leader out there, the team leader out there, they held me accountable. And so I was removed from my position as team leader. And then I was also removed from the unit that I told you was really hard to get to. And so that, again, threw me back into depression, threw me back into sleep disorders, no confidence in doing my job. Now I had a piece of paper that said it is my fault, and I could throw it into my therapist's face and say, see, this thing straight in black and white says this is my fault that this happened. And I had the validation that my brain was looking for. And so I was given 30 days to PCS, 30 days to move. I was also told that was I had to clean out my locker and my cage, where all my stuff was. And I had to do it on a weekend so that nobody could see me doing it. So I couldn't have team members around me. I couldn't have anybody with me. And they couldn't see me unloading 16 years of my life of, multiple deployments, a decade or 10 deployments. So that was just another kick in the gut. And so the unit I was supposed to go to was going to be back in Vegas. My wife and I had some significant troubles when we were in Vegas. And now, with the mental state I was in, with blaming myself, with no desire to do the job anymore, depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, I had access to go gamble. It was easy access to go out, to go drink myself into oblivion, to do all the things that I should not be doing. And I saw that pathway that I was going to go down. And I chose that's not going to be it for me. I can't do that, and I can't do that to my family. So I chose to medically retire with no plan, no idea what I was going to do next. I chose to do that with a diagnosis of PTSD and sleep apnea, and figure out what I was going to do next. And so dropped that paperwork, was able to stay with the same therapist that I had at the unit, and continue to work through the problems that I was now facing. And so as I did that process and started my way out. Uh, okay. Okay. My daughter. Um, so as I started figuring out that process of what I was going to do next, um, I started contacting some of my guys that had already gotten out. Some of my friends that I medically retired or was all the way out, and I asked, how do you continue the same treatment that you were getting at the unit? How do you do that when you're on the outside? And they laughed and said, it's a full-time job to do that. You see this organization here and this organization here, this nonprofit, and you put all these things together, and then maybe you can get the same effect. And you can try to do the VA, and you can get something there and get some stuff there. Just piece everything together. And I was like, that sounds awful, man. It does not sound like a good time. How do you have time for anything out of that? or after doing all that. And so I was like, there's got to be a better way. I had a shoulder injury that I was able to address and go to a company called Exos. And for SOCOM, we send our guys down there for an accelerated return to duty program where you just go there and work out and do rehab for your injury. I did that, and it was one of the best trips I've ever done. And I developed a relationship with them and got an internship with them. And with an internship, I met with the guy that I was kind of shadowing, and there was about 6 months of interning with him, and it was super super great um, experience to be underneath of this guy. A lot of valuable knowledge, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm going to be medically retiring soon. Um, is there going to be a job for me at the end of this?" And he's like, "No, no, there's not. You just need to start what you said you were going to start." And what I said I was going to start was a business or a nonprofit to do exactly or replicate what we had at the unit. So a human performance staff of strength conditioning coaches, nutritionists, psychologists, and all these people working together to keep us operating at a high level. And I wanted that on the outside. I wanted to be able to use that not only for veterans, but for first responders too, because like I was telling you earlier, is my dad spent 30 years in law enforcement. And as I was growing up, and I had a wonderful childhood, but my dad was also very strict and sometimes paranoid about certain things happening to us. And I don't blame him, because I became that same way. And I was exactly that same way. And I started to identify that he probably had some pretty severe PTSD and didn't know it. And nobody was ever talked about it. And he could have probably used the same things that I had available to me. So I wanted to afford that to law enforcement officers, you know, in currently in today's world, and first and other firefighters, and EMS personnel. So when he said that there's no job, you just need to start doing what you said you're going to do, I was like, well, how do I do that? And so I met with him, and he kind of held my hand through the whole process of starting up and setting up a 501c3, and we set that up in April, and was able to start raising funds for August. And so the plan, as I started to develop this with my co-founder, Dr. Jennifer Byrne, she's an occupational therapist, and the plan is to host veterans and first responders inside of a facility that does strength conditioning, nutrition, physical therapy, and then psych therapy and occupational therapy, and putting all of those together inside of one place and do that for a 4 week period. And then when they go home, do that another 12 weeks of telehealth so that they can apply the things that they learned in person at home. And I had this relationship with Exos, and I asked, can I do a test run inside your facility and use your staff? And they said, for sure. So it developed an agreement with them, and we ran our first test run in September at the Gulf Breeze location, where we had 4 first responders and veterans show up and go through a week of in-person and then 3 weeks of telehealth. And then we saw the results from that, and they were great, but it showed that it just wasn't long enough. So we did it again in January, and we did 2 weeks in person and 6 weeks of telehealth. And it was also very great. It was excellent outcome, but again, it just wasn't long enough. And I already knew this just from my experience. So we're doing this again in August. This time it'll be 3 weeks in person and 9 weeks of telehealth. And this one will be at the Phoenix location that Exos has. And we're just working ourselves up to that 4 week and 12 week model. The only restrictions or hurdles that we have is number one, funding. And then number two, just getting the word out that we're even trying to do something like this. We know it works, but we have to be able to get people to believe that it works, and not just people. We have to get law enforcement and firefighters and EMS personnel to say it's okay that the things that I normalized aren't normal. When they go up and show up to domestic violence calls, or they show up to a drowning, or murders, or even mass casualties like we saw the last couple weeks, those are not normal things that human beings should be seeing. And it's okay that they have nightmares and they start developing sleep apnea and anxiety and don't want to do the job anymore. It's okay to say that. And so one of the problems that I see in the system now in these law enforcement and first responder communities, and is the same thing that we deal with in the special operations community, is the second you say I have a problem and say I want some help, is the second that the psychologist and the command staff says, yeah, you're sitting these next few plays out. In fact, you're done. Like, you're not deploying anymore, you're not jumping anymore, you're not training. And that's not who we are, and that's not why we joined to become these professions. We joined so that we can continue to operate. If we can do this, find a way to get help that then gets us to be able to operate again, that's ideal. But in the special operations community, once you said, like, I got a problem, it was, well, you got PTSD, you can no longer jump again, here's some medications, and get on out, peace, thank you for your service. And so that seemed to be the going trend, and we're seeing that right now in the first responder and law enforcement community, is they don't want to say something because they're going to be in what they call the sad pile, that they're going to be sitting out and don't get to do their job anymore. They then get more depressed, they get put on medications, and then it can never come back. And so we want to be that third party, that they can send their folks to, their men and women, to go out, come to our facility, come through our program, and then they can come back and be operational and actually be functioning, members of the community and servants of the community. So that's what I do. That's what this is all about. And I feel like I've been talking for a very long time.
Oh my gosh. Where do we even start? That was an incredible share. The detail that you went into. Oh my gosh, you have been through a lot. You have been through so much. And it is amazing to me. I was telling you in the pre-talk, it's amazing to me how you were able to take all that you've been through, and just even how things ended, with all the validation of, it wasn't your fault, somebody had to be held responsible, and to have to end that way. I just can't believe how much you've gone through, and then be able to take all that with somehow you mustered up that grit again and say, you know what, I'm going to use all this and I'm going to help others not have to go through this. Like, it's just phenomenal. I mean, I have so many thoughts, but I want to open it up to everybody else. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions? I have to take a breath. Probably everybody has to take a breath.
No, I just want to, again, say thanks, again, for showing your vulnerability. And like Jeffrey said, just being able to take that, what you've been through personally, and coming through it and wanting to help others, it speaks volumes for you and your character. And again, appreciate it. And since that next cohort's coming to Phoenix, and I currently am in Phoenix, maybe I can find out some more.
Yeah, I'd love for you to come check it out. We have a lot of open invitations, and please, take a look at the website, and you kind of get an idea of exactly what it is. You get to see some of the stories of some of the folks that went through there, and some of them are all of them are very powerful, and they open up in there. And we've only been doing this for less than a year now, and we've got some pretty excellent results, and a community or a family developing of these folks that are just really leaning on each other. Part of my ability to, I guess, move forward was really Peter Cranes was the one who died in the accident, and he was a very big man of faith, and the way that his family carried themselves and was so forgiving and accepting of me, and reaching out to me and making sure that I was okay before they made sure that they were okay, was powerful. And at his funeral, I was a mess, and I was watching them, and I was like, how am I worse off than they are? They're burying their husband and their son, and how am I so distraught? And they played a video at his funeral, and it was of Peter speaking, and last time I heard Peter speak was right before he fell, and so he was talking actually about his journey through some depression that he was facing. He actually went to Virginia Tech, and he was there for the Virginia Tech shooting and the massacre when that took place. And he actually wasn't there that day. He missed that day, but his friends were, and one of his best friends was killed in that. And so he felt very guilty, and he went down a spiral of depression, started questioning everything that he was doing and his beliefs, and spent about a year of that. And as he was speaking, he was talking, it was almost like he was talking directly to me. And so just that message was exactly what I needed to hear. And the story that he told was exactly what I needed to hear. And my driving, the drive forward and my I guess, reinstillment in faith. I had lost faith. I grew up Catholic, and then deploying as many times as I did, and seeing the fight, people fighting over a religious cause over and over again, murdering each other. I was like, there's no way that this could be a thing. So I lost faith, and then just seeing the interaction that Peter's family, the way they carried themselves, and then just that message in itself was almost like it was directly to me, and it had to be that way. And so what can I do to best honor him and continue to help other people and spread the word that he lived by so much. So um, that's what pushed me forward.
Excellent. Thank you again.
Yeah, it's obviously given you the strength that you have. I mean, it's just remarkable. It's amazing. I have had so many thoughts. I'm curious, can we backtrack a little bit unless somebody else has a comment or question? Welcome, Jeff and Scott. Good to see you. You made a statement you wanted people to hate you originally. Was that because can you share why you felt that way, or what was behind those thoughts?
Yeah, because I hated myself, and I didn't want other people. I wanted that validation. I didn't feel like I deserved people to look at me and with like any way of, because I failed. Like I felt like I failed as a leader. I failed as a medic. I failed in every way, and I wanted them to see me as a failure because I felt like a failure. Peter wasn't on my team directly. He was actually on red team, and I was the team leader of gold team. So his team was deployed, and Peter was actually just come back from a deployment, and he so his team, when they found out, they were my good friends. Um, it was almost like it was somebody else's child in your watch, and you were supposed to take care of them, and you were supposed to, they entrusted you with their safety. And because he died, it was like I had to go to their team leaders and say, like, I failed you. And so I guess that's what drove me to wanting them to hate me.
Just to not have a discrepancy in your mind. I mean, it's hard for me to, I mean, to me, it just seems, like what could somebody do? But I understand what you're saying. Like you don't want there to be a discrepancy. You hated yourself at that time. So you felt like, everyone else should too. Yeah. Oh man, that's really tough. That's a tough one. That is a tough one. Yeah, once again, I'm brought to no words. Oh, gosh. I really appreciate what you're doing for other people that are suffering in silence or going through this and don't have the type of support that they really need to heal this kind of spiritual wound. I mean, wouldn't you say it's a spiritual wound? Like something like this would fall under that category?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all spiritual, physical, and mental, in every aspect, because really the symptoms. So I was able to combat the symptoms of my depression through therapy, and through physical fitness, go work out and stop drinking and start living healthy. But it didn't change the guilt. There's nothing changed the guilt that I had. The only thing that could change the guilt was to see one of my buddies who was a pastor after listening to Peter speak at his funeral. In that video, I went to my buddy who was a pastor, Brandon Wood, and asked him to just help me understand what Peter lived by. What did he believe in? And so that was the only thing that gave me forgiveness. So that all three of those pillars combined is what kind of helped me forgive myself.
That's such a huge point. And it's funny, I was just talking to somebody this morning about that. There's something you can absolutely wear yourself out physically, mentally, but there's something about like the emotional part, guilt, shame, that is so heavy. I mean, that is a whole different ball game to figure out. I mean, that absolutely turns everything upside down, is when you can't reconcile the guilt or the shame, and how incredibly important it is to somehow find the way to support somebody to freedom again. Because once they have that, don't you think once they have that hope again, the other things will pretty much fall into place, no matter how hard they are, even physically. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because I'm thinking about all these people that could be listening that are suffering in silence right now.
Yeah, exactly. I think I would venture to say most, if not all, of our folks that go through our program, and even individuals I know, that they're the most common cause, or the most common emotion felt, or whatever's causing their PTSD, is guilt from whatever incident took place. Whether it's survivor's guilt, whether it's they did something wrong on an op and accidentally somebody got killed in that. In some way, it's some form of guilt. And how do they process through that? So when they get this hope, and you can see it in somebody's eyes. One of the coaches at Exos during our first cohort, on the day 3, he looked at one of the guys going through our program. He was a former Navy corpsman, and he said, "Hey, like, have you seen him? Like, his eyes are completely different than they were yesterday. Like, it is like somebody turned on a light switch inside of his brain, and he is now here with us, and yesterday he was not." So it's very visible. And once that happens, once that hope comes through, it still takes a lot of work and a lot of self identification of things to do to continue to be healthy, because that never goes away. The guilt and the PTSD, it'll never go away. It's always there, even for me. And some things still trigger episodes for me, and it's managing that. How do I manage that, and how do I make sure that I keep myself into a healthy lifestyle and do things that are healthy for me? That's always going to be work, and you just have to be willing to do the work. And we just help them get there. And I say, here's what that looks like. Here's what right looks like for you, and we'll provide everything you need. Like, when somebody goes through our program, it's free to everybody that goes through it. So it's about $15,000 a person to go through it. That's what it costs, and typically that most of the biggest cost is airfare, lodging. You stay in a 5-star resort hotel, and then we pay the therapists and the coaches at Exos, and then you get all your meals taken care of, and they're actually really excellent meals. And then they do strength conditioning in the morning. They do yoga. They'll do a massage, physical therapy, use any of the modalities of treatment inside their recovery inside the facility. And then in the afternoons, it's either individual or group therapy in some sort of facet, in some way.
Wow,
And
what
then go to the hotel and sit in the hot tub.
and with other people who get it, right?
That's actually where the biggest therapy takes place, is when our individuals goes back to the hotel and they sit in the hot tub, and then they start bonding with each other and start talking about each other's backgrounds. And all of them come from some different background. They all have some sort of different experience, yet all their symptoms are pretty similar. And so they talk through how do they manage that? Like when did this take place for you? Like, oh, do you have sleep apnea? I got sleep apnea. I die more often than you do and per an hour. Just those little jokes like that keep people that keep them engaged, and then they start building the competitions in the morning in the gym, and they push each other harder in the gym, and they eat better, and then they do the therapy in the afternoon because originally they didn't want to go there for the therapy. Um, because what they really wanted to go there for was the gym stuff. And then the more important thing that they actually look forward to is the therapy in the afternoons, because they're all wore out from the gym, and now they're going to be more vulnerable and emotional and open in the afternoons with all these endorphins running through their system and a dopamine response from the workout. Um, and so you see some really, really great results from them in the therapy sessions.
That's incredible. You really look at all angles. And I mean, even just they now they know they're not alone.
Hmm.
That simple thing, they're not alone. They're all going through the same challenge. And gosh, you've just covered so many different angles. Please raise your hand if you want to ask a question, because I have a ton that I'll just keep rolling. Okay, I'll ask you one more while I don't see a hand. So one thing that we talk about often, different stories, is it's sometimes there's the trauma of the events that happen. So the traumatic events happen, and that's terrible. I mean, it could be anybody, civilians, whether it's the most horrific events, surviving a suicide loss, rape, all the things that happen in combat, maybe maybe leadership not having your back. That's tough too. I know, just maybe a lack of loyalty or something, but something traumatic happens. And it seems like so much of the hardship for people to heal is maybe the way things happen, like right after. How was it handled? When a traumatic event happened, the very next person to see and deal with the trauma, how was that handled?
For me,
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you want to talk about that? Sorry, I saw a lot of commotion on the screen. I got a little distracted. That took a little long.
Yeah, for me, the very next thing, like I said, I gave myself 2 minutes, because the very next thing, the morning, was um, doing an investigation, a safety investigation, and writing out statements, and having to go back out to the site and relive the event literally within 12 hours of the event happening, and going back out there and explaining to these people what happened, and feeling like now I have to almost legally defend myself, because their job is to try to pinpoint whose fault is it, who's the blame, and not just me, but the rest of my team. My team was out there, and I'm trying to protect my team members that um, none of us did anything wrong, yet they're trying to find a way. We're having to go through OSI, or Office of Special Investigations, um, interrogations. We're going through sitting in a one-on-one meeting, and it was a criminal investigation to figure out if one of us had done something wrong to to kill him in some way. And so that immediately was not healing in any way, and led to more trauma. And so for me, I was trying to shield my guys by taking all of that on. And so they were able to recover, and some of them, a couple of the guys, I know are dealing with it still. Um, I guess it's hard to figure out exactly how somebody handles each thing, because everybody has a limit. Their expectations of what causes somebody's trauma is very different. Where just oversees a rocket, a mortar fire coming in and impacting near you. For most of us in special operations, not a big deal. pretty common thing. But some other folks in maintenance or working in the offices and things like that, that's a very traumatic experience for them because this is the first time somebody's ever done something to try to kill them. And so some of them have a very traumatic experience from that. And so it's different levels of where were their expectations in that capacity, I guess. I don't know if that answered your question at all.
Hey, Steve, I'll take a question here. I've been in and out of my comms here. I appreciate your story. Scott Rathke here. I don't know that we've ever met. Your name looks familiar. I'm not sure how I've met you prior to this, but I have been in contact with Jen, your co-founder, quite a few times. So her and I have, I've sent her quite a few folks that have with your program. And I actually was going to I was going to be part of the pilot, and then I couldn't figure out time to get away. And I'm transitioning out of the SEAL community here this year. And so we may have crossed paths at some point in time if you work with Development Group or one of the other groups that are out there. But yeah, fascinating story, man. I appreciate your honesty, and you definitely hit a lot of points of issues within communities. A long road to go to get any progress, I would say, in the military, to getting it to a place where open dialogue or medication being able to be taken for operators is acceptable. And that's a difficult one to challenge. As many leaders as I have sat across from, and their mouths move like, oh, we're doing so much, and people are coming forward, but yet the psychologists and psychiatrists within each group are not booked with appointments. When you have thousands of operators, but nobody wants to go see them, there's a problem with that, right? Yeah. And it's because nobody wants to do what you say. And that's tough, right? And I get your struggle, and I had that guilt my whole career, so I can relate. I haven't, obviously involved in
Oh, Scott, you froze. It's always in the cliffhanger.
Yeah.
It's like, what is he about to say? Hey, Scott, I don't know if you can hear me, but hold that thought. We want to hear it.
He does sound familiar. I'm pretty sure him and I think have worked together back in 2018.
Oh, really?
I think we were at the same squadron together up at the beach. If he comes back, I'll ask him.
Yeah, that's funny because I actually was thinking about him. I wanted to introduce you to him, so it's really cool that he hopped on this call.
Yeah.
Okay, he'll pop on again. And while he does, I don't know, Steve, hearing all these stories, it hurts me. It hurts me to hear about how things are handled with first responders. And I hear so many stories, and it hurts to hear how these traumas are handled within the agencies. And,
yeah, one of my guys, one of my really close friends, I've known him for 10 years. He had some just the same kind of experiences as I have for deployments. He had 10 deployments, very gnarly ones, a lot of significant trauma, especially treating kids overseas after getting shot and whatnot. So led to a path of his own self-destruction. And then he ended up getting reprimanded at work for that, rather than we recognize you probably have some symptoms of PTSD that need to be addressed. And so rather than send him to a place that we typically go to for healing, called NICO, they cut him off of that and actually kicked him out of the unit, and said, we're not going to send you there. because if we send you there, you will likely, they will find something wrong with you, and then you're going to end up being medically retired out of the unit. And we don't want that, because so many guys are medically retiring out of our unit, and they're like, yeah, that's a bad look for us. So we'd rather just deny you care and send you somewhere else so you can be somebody else's problem. And he's not the only one. He's one of our intel officers or intel folks that went through our last program or one of our previous programs. Same thing. It's unfortunate. It's not changing, that the leaders are worrying about themselves. But they're not leaders. They're managers, and they're managers of numbers, and they're not managers of people. They're managers of their own reputation and what they see for themselves, like how people view themselves, rather than like, hey, this person had made some poor decisions. Let's take care of it, the way the Air Force has to take care of it, but also let's get him help. Instead, it's we're gonna just completely smash him, get him out of here, and then deal with it. And I'm talking to a point where he was talking about killing himself, and I had to talk him off of taking his own life. And that's it's a failure in leadership, and it's going to get highlighted. I will make sure that it gets highlighted in some way, because that's not a one-off. He's not a unique situation. It happens more often than you think, and some of these leaders will be held accountable.
That's good. It's horrifying to think that this happens all the time. Just horrifying. And I want to give Scott the platform again. Scott, we'd love to hear what you had to say if you're able.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to find reception here in the freaking parking lot. That I don't know wind tunnel of the airport here at San Diego, but I'm trying to find a different spot. They may be jammed, so just be careful.
Well, I love your perseverance, Scott.
Like it was overheating, so I was not gonna let this not are good, and I really liked what you said, and so, but my point in on it is he's right. You know, a lot's not going to change until the top. Like that's people that are sitting in on the Capitol Hill, and people that are, and we've talked about this before, Sarah. It's like our congressmen and women that value law and that value like hearing from vets and hearing from people about the struggles with the things they go through. This is a big one, and this is the one that got they quote unquote say there's a lot of attention on it, but there really isn't. The attention's there, but they're just not they're not attacking it in a way of keeping people in the community and allowing them to have the discussions that they may be struggling with and have the things that they need to take for medication and not on time of waiver processes and all the other things that go on with that. Steve's right. He's right on the mark about how unfortunate the tip of the spear can't really even get the right care that they're required, and we're being asked to just do more, and he's right. No human can really take the things that you've seen and the things you've been involved with and just throw it away and compartmentalize. You can only do that for so long. And there's a point in time when something breaks, right? The levee of the dam breaks and or there's something that happens where it really breaks down. And I think, Steve, what you've set up is awesome, and I hope to be a participant at some point in time. Again, I've worked with Jen, and I've sent her a bunch of folks I've been talking to about your program with. I got a friend here on the San Diego Police Department. He's a former Ranger, 75th Ranger, 2nd Battalion, and he spent 10 years Ranger, and now he's on the SWAT team here in San Diego. And I've told him about your program. He's kind of spreading the word around to that department of this of his special ops team that they got here for the SWAT team, and others, right? And so I as I hear people like talk about the things that there's a program out there, and you guys are developing it. And I hope that you get to your 4 week period where it's consistent and people are able to utilize that in that capacity, because I've seen benefits in home based program and NICO and others, and that's you're right. That's when you learn the most, is when you're not necessarily in the therapy room, but it's the time when you're peer to peer, and you finally all of a sudden start to see that, man, there's you think that too? I wasn't the only one, and because these are the things and the thoughts and the feelings are not discussed. We're not. It's just not talked about, right? And so to be able to like be in a vulnerable environment to say, hey, I got that too, and yeah, I know how you feel, and then you're with each other, right? And then you're on Slack channels together, and then you're like checking in with one another, right? Where you can check in with your guys and your partners and your peers and your other leaders, but they don't know what you're truly going through, because you may not even have shared that stuff with them, So yeah, I just appreciate your time and a great story, and I'm glad to be able to finish my remarks to you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, I think we came across each other. I don't know if you're at the beach at Virginia Beach in 2018, because that's my time was there, and then same within 2015 and 16. So I was up there for a couple pumps, but your name does sound familiar, even if it wasn't that time period. And then yeah, like I was telling Sarah just before you pop back on, and Daniel, is I think what you're saying about at some point there's a breaking point. Usually in our community, the breaking point actually falls within the family and the self-destruction. It's typically in our community not usually taking our own life until after we get out. It's the self-destruction and the family destruction, where our divorce rate within our community is a 90%, 85 to 90% divorce rate. And it's not because these people are dirtbags and they're horrible human beings and they're just really garbage people. It's because they're living with so much guilt and they're looking for acceptance in any possible way that they can. And they find it somewhere. They find a high risk activity or a high risk lifestyle, even while they're home. And so we had, like I was out in Phoenix this week, and I was able to meet with Congressman Biggs and tell him about some of these statistics and say, hey, this is what's happening, and here's what happened to me. And it's not unusual that I was removed and kicked out of the unit, and one of my guys is about to be, and our families are getting destroyed and our lives are being destroyed, and we're just being used so often and so much that like there's a problem. And so we, with his help soon, we're getting introduced to some folks up at the Hill, up at the Capitol Hill, and within the state legislation within Arizona, at least, that we'll be able to make some waves. And that's the plan, is, two front. Number one, hold some leaders accountable, and number two, get some money and some funding to provide these resources that we're trying to provide for a vast group of people. And so not only just working out of Phoenix and Florida, but we'll have another one in San Diego that we're going to try to open up, and we'll have another one in Texas that we're going to try to open up, and start to just expand this to now have multiple teams to do exactly what we're doing. And it's only been a year, so let's see what happens in the next two to 4 years.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think it's great that you were able to recognize and take action for yourself at such a young age. Because I'll let you know, I came in the Army in '85, and a lot of my senior leadership was, they were Vietnam vets, and it was right away, it was, suck it up and drive on. And that set my trajectory. And like you, I grew up, Roman Catholic, and I was going through some stuff early on, and I went to go to talk to somebody about it, as a 19-year-old trooper. And so I went to the chaplain, and that didn't go well. Gave me a pamphlet and a book and said, go read this. And, so that set my trajectory. So I'm crusty now and qualify for the senior discount at Denny's. And I just was able to have my first mental health help. So being able to recognize it young, like you, and I was never a tier 1 soldier, but I've been some places and done some stuff. So I think anyone that has those type of situations, deployments, and have experienced what we've seen, obviously not to your level, but we got to remember the rest of us who weren't tier 1 that are still suffering.
Yeah, I think a majority of, and I wanted to make it very specific, actually, to not, for the folks that are going through our program to be veterans of all capacities, because actually, I would love to learn the statistics of what our conventional folks are doing, or even the tier 2, tier 3, or how they managed. Because if you look at some of these young guys that went into the Army or the Marines early in the war, and they went and did 4 years, and they did like a 12-month stint or a 13-month stint, and maybe did 1 or 2 of those and then came back, and either they wanted to go into some sort of SF career field or some sort of special operations career field, there's a psychological evaluation, and if they didn't pass that, they're kicked right back to their unit. And generally, now this is an assumption, but they're probably like, I'm out. I'm not doing the thing that I wanted to do. I'm out of here. And then they just fall back into their previous life. And a lot of them, if they didn't make or pass a psychological exam, they're probably not seeking therapy outside on their own. And they probably entered into the military with some sort of predisposed disposition of some sort of psychological problem, because they were facing either some sort of jail time or homelessness or something of that sort before they entered the military. So that's the demographic I would like to hit the most, because no dig on them, they just seem to be the least resilient as far as like when they were brought up. They were exposed to some really gnarly things, their friends getting blown up and killed around them, and then they don't have a psychologist that is embedded in their units. They don't have a nutritionist and a human performance. They don't know any of that exists. It's just, like you said, suck it up. We've all been through it. Move on. That's the demographic I'd love to hit, and just show them that people care.
Absolutely, I think that's great.
Yeah, no, to Daniel's point, it kind of even like touches like folks and I'll speak openly about the aircraft carriers incidents that we've had in the Navy, right? We've had 4 suicides in a month, and everyone's like, what? How can they get? Well, because their lives suck. I mean, they're living on a ship. They can't, no one, it's like there's a cycle here that's going on, right? And they can't go talk to anybody. They're young sailors, and they're dealing with things, and they're just trying to make it, right? They're just trying to make it to maybe to the next rank or the next rate. They're an MOS, and it's like it's across the battle force. But the more GMTs, the more GMTs we can do, the training, the better off they're going to be, right? We're going to stand up in front of them. We're going to tell them where this is a problem. This is a problem. Okay. All hands. Okay, got it. But really, what are we doing about it? We just had the problem stage, We ain't doing crap about it. You ain't doing anything about it, right? It's like it's a very lip service, as you said, Steve. And to Daniel's point, you're right. There are absolutely there are more of the non-elite folks that need support than even the elite guys and gals, right? I mean, it's inevitable that this is going to struggle, and it's only the beginning of kind of where we have seen this whole since 9/11 till now, right? I mean, we're not even here through the wave yet. The wave hasn't even crashed, and we're still got folks in the service ranks that have experienced things 20 years ago when this thing started. And yet they're not getting out. Guys like me, they're getting ready to retire, right? And so it's the wave is only beginning, and yet if we don't get ahead of it, which we're not, we're always behind the wave. The crash is going to come, and that's going to cost more. to the VA. It's going to cost more to the government just because of these outrageous costs, and we're going to lose lives with it as well.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely agree.
I appreciate you sharing, Scott. I feel like you always, you are somebody that has always come across like you really care about people. And so I just value what you have to say so much. And I'm really glad that you guys can meet, that you're all here. The three of you are on this call. I really want to help. Steve, I want to support you. I mean, Daniel, sorry, I didn't mean to laugh about the crusty old. I think you and I are the same age, so I had a good laugh about that for a second.
Yeah. You see the difference in the color of the beard there.
Oh, and then
Yeah.
Scott.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, I graduated Ranger School in 1989, so that's how crusty I am.
Well, again, and Daniel is another, I love the people that are coming together on these calls, because it really, you all are people who care. And I always think about this: if we can get the right people together to do something, to act together, who knows different people, how can we network? How can we be stronger together to get things done? So I really appreciate it. I really appreciate what you all have said. And Steve, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. You have a platform here. If you ever want to come back and share more, you are always welcome. I definitely would love to stay connected. So, if there's anything that we can do, we will. The first responders would have loved this talk, so I will let them know to listen to, right, Daniel? This is like right along with what we talk about all the time. So, anyway, let's say goodbye here on the recording part. But can you hang on a second afterward? Thanks all for watching this, and I will put the contact information for Steve Nisbet and for also Shields and Stripes on the description. So thanks all so much for being here.